We live.
What's up, family? Bless up. Welcome to another episode. Bless up, family. Welcome to another episode of Constructive Convos, where we are bringing the
Big up.
conversation black to black. And let me just introduce the panel real quick because we got a really good show, interesting. We're gonna really want get some participation in there. As you come in, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. You share. The topic of mental health is one that we definitely want to share and get this out here. So, yeah. So let me just introduce everyone on the panel. We got our sister Nine Ether 99. Bless up to the.
Nine just came. You know me. I was a bit.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I interrupted you
It's
earlier when you were
okay.
doing your introduction. You
It's
scared
okay.
minds in the building, of course.
Scattered minds in the building. He hype. He ready to talk about this mental health right here.
Of
Um,
course.
we got brother B2.
Big up, family. Bless up to the panel, everyone in the chat.
We got our brother Witness.
What was that? Someone said something about me. Stay in your lane. Peace.
And
We need some little jingle buttons. Some fire shots or something.
exactly. And I am Melanated Goddess. And this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. Mental health. And I'm a mental health practitioner here in the United States. I've been doing this for, I should know how long I've been doing this. Informally, unlicensed, I could say that. I know that because my son was a baby. So almost 19 years. Um, but I would say like professionally, got to be over 10, like more like 12 years or so. So yeah. So yeah, we wanted to talk about mental health and how we can support each other in a black community. Um, what guess we want to start with um, what are the what is mental health? What are the different types of mental health? Our brother B2 looked up some categories, and then I guess we can discuss how those are like manifested in our community, and if we see those or if we don't or whatever.
hmm So I'll just get them up quickly. Sorry, I'm just
Okay.
again.
I want to say it was one category was mood disorder, anxiety disorder,
Yeah,
um, Lord, I'm thinking of the two.
psych.
Psychotic disorders.
Yeah,
Psychotic disorders. Hold on. You said dementia. Dementia was a separate category,
hmm
and
The last one was eating
that was
disorders.
eating disorders. Oh, I was
Yeah,
close. I was close.
close. 3 out of the 4 still. So anxiety disorders. People with anxiety disorders respond to certain objects or situations with fear, as well as with physical signs of anxiety or panic, such as a rapid heartbeat and sweating. An anxiety disorder is diagnosed if the person's response is not appropriate for the situation, if the person cannot control the response, or if the anxiety interferes with normal functioning. Now you see that last line. I've come to learn it's actually quite key in most areas of mental health. On a day-to-day basis or in isolated situations, like this thing said, appropriately, we may have these little glimpses or responses that over a long chronic period of time you might be able to diagnose as mental health, but in a snapshot scenario, it wouldn't necessarily register as mental health. So it's not abnormal to be anxious at times for good reason. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just when that anxiety becomes a prolonged problem and it's getting in the way of normal functionality and it's out of your control, that's when it becomes more of an issue. So yeah, anxiety disorders, that's one. Mood disorders. These disorders, also called affective disorders, involve persistent feelings of sadness or periods of feeling overly happy or fluctuations from extreme happiness to extreme sadness. The most common mood disorders are depression, bipolar disorders, and cyclothymic disorders. I'm not sure what that is. Cyclothymic disorders. We'll come back to that.
Cyclothymic.
Yeah, cyclothymic. Oh, I've clicked it. Cyclothymic disorders is a relatively mild mood disorder. In cyclothymic disorders, moods swing between short periods of mild depression and hypomania, an elevated mood. The low and high mood swings never reach the severity or duration of major depression or full mania episodes. People with cyclothymic disorders have milder symptoms than occur in full-blown bipolar disorders. So it's not quite bipolar; it's a lot milder, basically.
Okay. I they used to they gave a different name. It used to be bipolar one and bipolar two, which I can understand how that was would be confusing for some people when they're getting diagnosed. They would just say I got bipolar disorder, and so people would just automatically lump it under one particular one. So um, yeah, that is more than likely the
The
bipolar
same thing.
2. Yeah, the same thing because it mentioned hypomania. So the difference
Yes.
between bipolar 1, which would just be full blown mania, and then
Mhm.
bipolar 2 would be hypomania, less severe symptoms. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Okay, so the first two categories so far, anxiety disorders and mood disorders. Yeah. Now the third one is psychotic disorders. Now psychotic disorders involve distorted awareness and thinking. Two of the most common symptoms of psychotic disorders are hallucinations, the experience of images or sounds that are not real, such as hearing voices and delusions, which are false fixed beliefs that the ill person accepts as true, despite evidence to the contrary. Schizophrenia, for example, is a psychotic disorder.
Hmm.
So it's talking about a distortion of awareness or the way we think, and we might hear things, have delusions.
People
Those
also
are all psychotic.
with schizophrenia, you could also have distortions of like tactile um, hallucinations, or I guess a
Mm,
distortion of like your senses for touch. So a person, um, I don't know if you've ever seen like someone wearing like a big puffy coat in the middle of the summer. Like they literally are not
yeah,
feeling the
yeah,
sun burning on them. They feel cold, or vice versa. They may feel
yeah. Mm,
like something is itching them, and it's nothing. They don't have on like a wool sweater or something like that, but they just feel itchy. Their
yeah,
skin will feel, just something. If they're supposed to feel cool, they feel
mm,
hot. You put ice on them, and they say, "Oh, that's burning me," and you're
yeah.
like, "What? What do you mean?" So that's just another example of, um,
The psychotic
hallucination, the
disorders. Yeah.
psychotic disorders.
Mm. So the fourth one is eating disorders, which is obviously quite self-explanatory. It involves extreme emotions or attitudes and behaviors involving weight and food. Anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorders are the most common eating disorders.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's it. And then it goes further and talks about impulse control and addiction based disorders, personality disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, which is probably overly self
Those
diagnosed.
diagnosed,
Um,
yes, yes, that is
yeah.
definitely one of those one of those disorders that definitely gets over, especially like you said, self-diagnosed. You're like, oh, I got OCD, I got OCD, and it's like,
Yeah,
no, boo, you really don't.
yeah.
You don't
I
have
guess as
it.
well though, with mental health, a common theme again is the whole idea of a spectrum. The idea that we fall somewhere within that spectrum, and maybe perhaps where we fall on that is negligible, and not symptoms aren't obvious to naked eye, but we fall somewhere on it. So I guess
Yeah,
maybe perhaps people do have elements of OCD, but not like, yeah, what we expect.
what we
It,
expect. Yeah.
yeah. It also talks about post-traumatic stress disorders, which is a key one because those ones I think as well, they can be like so woven into a person that it can actually be sometimes, I don't know, this is an assumption. I've not got any experience or any qualifications or skills in it, but I guess it could be quite hard to address or emotionally difficult to address. It says here PTSD is a condition that can develop following a traumatic or terrifying event, such as a sexual or physical assault, the unexpected death of a loved one, or a natural disaster. People with PTSD often have lasting and frightening thoughts and memories of events that tend to be emotionally numb.
Hmm. So,
Mm,
PTSD is definitely one of the disorders that I feel is very relevant to the conversation about like the Black community, right? And why we see some of the things that we see, and you know, people's behaviors, and how society, how we diagnose them, and kind of how we would treat each other, because definitely the label or the reason that we attribute to someone's behavior is going to dictate our response. Would you agree?
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel like, okay, if someone is unstable and then they start going, oh, fuck you, you motherfucker, you probably gonna be like, okay, they're unstable. You know what I'm saying? Like, or if they say, oh yeah, because I'm pregnant, you're probably gonna say like, they're delusional. I saw her. She's not pregnant. She's just, you know what I'm saying, having one of those moments. You is gonna, so the way that you perceive them to have something, have a disorder, or have some mental health concerns or not, that's gonna dictate your response to it, if you're gonna actually take it on. So when we look at our family, right? Whether if we recognize that something may be up, that should dictate like, do we deal with them with compassion? Do we deal with them with some understanding? You know, are we gonna sit there and fight someone who's having a psychotic breakdown? Or are we gonna, you know what I mean? Like, are we going to, are we going to recognize that that's what it is, or perhaps it may not be that? Like, it's, I'm not saying it's all, it's for everything. That's the answer. That's not what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah,
Um, but I do think that with the level of trauma that we are exposed to expect people not to be traumatized, I don't think that that's, I just don't think that that's reasonable. I don't know what y'all think about that.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, I think like it's tricky. Like with mental health, people just like, especially in our community, we're just not really too informed of the different ways that it can be expressed. So like detection is probably um an initial issue, but then knowing how to best support that person, especially when you're connected to that person like on a personal level. Um,
Yeah, I think.
yeah,
Sorry, I think you summed it up there. To be honest with on those 2 points, I think those are the two key areas within the community that we struggle with, and that we're gonna struggle. That I mean, like even we're having this conversation now, I don't know what the solutions or the answers are. and like having some experience with it, I still don't know the answers. Like I said, if you're close to somebody, you're probably the worst person to try and deal with them if they have an issue like that. However, as the community, we have such little trust for the quote unquote system, right? We don't like the system. Mental health doctors, especially, we are very wary of them. We know, like historically, within our community, like like during the 80s and the 70s, like the police were able to use that whole mental health act just to lock black people up without any sort of trial or anything like that, just to say, he's a danger to himself and to public. And that happened quite a lot under the sus laws. And so as a community, we are very skeptical of mental health doctors or the mental health institutions, yet we in ourselves as a community can't deal with it. So I wouldn't know. Like, I mean, I think it is down, I suppose, to some extent, not to put it all down to melanated, but it's down to sisters and people like melanated. I know a couple people who have studied psychology and things like that. It's a very hard industry to get into, especially with our community, because we don't necessarily see the benefits. I mean, it's not like we're funding it. We don't necessarily have a huge amount of philanthropists anyway who are just giving out funds to charities to do these types of works. So yeah, I mean, I don't. That is very very bleak in my opinion for it, and I think like mental health issues are going to rise. Like we're saying, there is this whole traumatic post-traumatic stress syndrome or PTSD that a lot of people are getting like a lot of young people are getting here like from a young age. And alongside that, there's also all these social anxieties that are being caused and brought about by social media and people who just aren't used to having those same kind of interactions that we once did in terms of talking to, like, just going out and like being out and meeting people. Now a lot of people are just out on the internet and just talking to people on things like Hangouts, for example, and so they're not really building up those social skills. And so I feel like we're set to increase mental health issues, but the level of support there is for people with mental health issues is, especially within our community, it's even more wanted. I mean, I think it's definitely I think we're in a dire situation personally. I think it's just going to keep getting worse.
Mm. Well, I hope that more and more Black people decide to get involved in mental health seriously. Like, I think although I am capable of providing services to any person, as long as I think right now language is a barrier for me, so as long as they speak English, um you know I am definitely able to provide good intervention, clinical intervention, and help people who don't necessarily look like me. But I do think that it's important for more Black clinicians, more people who are interested in this field to go to become trained uh, to deal with someone and help them towards recoveries, help them towards healing, to a level where their functioning is better, where they can actually be a helpful, productive person and rejoin the community. So definitely, I think that, like, and being, like, even working with children, with young children, a lot of our young children have young Black women helping them, but they don't really get to see a Black man being their therapist, being their school counselor and things like that. Like, we definitely, it's a push because it just shows like the balance in the community. So we want to see the Black man in that position. Every time a Black man gets hired, and I'm like, I get all excited, like, woo, like because I know the impact it's gonna have. Just the imagery alone, and the energy that a Black man that he brings, or his perspective, and having young Black men see a Black man who has emotional intelligence. You understand what I'm saying? Like, he can break things down or help them in from an emotional perspective. Uh, that in itself is teaching. So, um, you know, if you know some young person and they seem like they don't know what they want to do, this is definitely a good field. It's definitely needed. Um, yeah, I agree.
Do you? I got a question for the panel. Yeah. Do you
Hmm.
think here that the our community, um, I mean, it's a bit of a loaded question, but how could we care? How could we invest more in like our overall health and well-being? And will that have a sufficient impact on mental health occurrences within our community?
How can we what invest? That does
In
sound
our
like
in
a
our
deep question
well-being.
right there. Hmm.
So how could we better invest in our health and our general health and well-being? And will that have enough of an impact on the amount of occurrences of mental health in our community and health and well-being? So eating good, living good, lifestyles, good work-life balance, the rest of it, taking time to, live good, eat well, all of that. Do you think that has an impact on mental health?
Yes, yes, definitely. I think that yeah, I think that your physical health, your stress level, um, your hormone level, um, all of those things contribute to you know your overall mental health. I
Mm,
would say there's some research that would say with certain disorders that wouldn't necessarily play a factor, but I'm not so sure if I don't know. I would I would say maybe schizophrenia would probably be one that I would be like, huh, I don't know,
mm.
you
I
know.
think you, I
But
think you're right though.
depression,
Some,
yes, depression, depression. I would say, um, yes, I would say attention deficit disorder, yes. Diet, proper sleep. Some environmental things can contribute to those things. Some social practices can contribute to those. You know, so I don't know if like, and my personal belief is that diet, rest, exercise, you know, barely none trauma. Because there's an aspect of PTSD, which is like being hyper vigilant, being like very jumpy, and if a teacher observes that, they could think that the child has attention deficit disorder. You see what I'm saying? Like, or let's say they seem spacey and they say, oh, they're not paying attention, but really they're having a flashback of their trauma, but they don't want to tell the teacher that. So I'm saying that there's sometimes things are environmental that can make it look like it's something else. And that's where having a good clinician comes into place, doing a very thorough, comprehensive assessment to make sure they're asking all the right questions and all of that. That's really key. Hope I didn't confuse my answer, but I do think that the aspect that you can do in self-care can mitigate someone developing, mental health problems.
is something like that you said here that just sort of triggered a thought, and I agree. Like I think certain mental healths we can sort of draw some sort of correlation to our lifestyles, um, as maybe being a plausible reason for how that, or at least being a contributing factor to how that mental health came about, how that person got it. But other ones, I think maybe there's more of a biological, neurological level sort of misconnection, if you like. I think things like eating disorders, for instance, we can link that to entertainment and self-hate and um, positive images and the rest of that and role models. Um, and other things we can link to other things like schizophrenia. I guess is probably somewhere on the line in it, because half of the worry is that it's being inappropriately diagnosed or incorrectly diagnosed. Do you know what I mean? So maybe perhaps someone's just dealing with things in a certain type of way, but they've got a mental health label. That's another area of mental health. Do we think maybe people are too quickly to get labeled? And sorry, before we even go down that route, I think Scad wanted to say something.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just gonna jump in and say that is definitely an issue in terms of like we were saying, in terms of the mislabeling and people getting diagnosed maybe prematurely or prior to planning. But also I do think there's also a matter of the reality of, especially with schizophrenia and not just schizophrenia, any sort of mental health issues that produce bouts of psychosis, is that like, I don't know, it's like so like I don't understand it, innit? Like most people I know don't understand it. Like how do you like deal with somebody who does actually genuinely present those things? Do you know what I mean? Because obviously as a community, we don't trust the pills or the drugs, do you know what I mean, or the medication that some of these people have. But I mean, so whilst on one hand I could say, yeah, this schizophrenia thing, yeah, sometimes it's misdiagnosed, there's also the situations where the schizophrenia thing is a matter of right, like this person actually thinks they're Jesus right now. Do you know what I mean? Like they're actually saying they're Jesus and they actually believe it, and they might jump off this building, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, and as much as that might sound crazy and beyond or even an exaggeration, these are situations that do happen and that happen to people in their houses. Do you know what I mean? Like people have to deal with their sons or their brothers or their cousins who are acting or behaving this kind of way, and they have no idea what to do other than just eventually calling the police and getting them put in one of these, sections. So, yeah.
Now, I mean, I think that if the person's behavior is like causing a safety concern, like at what cost does the community want to stand on their guns against medication at all costs? Like, I just think that if the person wanted to kill other people before they took the pill and after they took the pill, they sitting out chilling and reading a book. I don't know about you, but I want them to take the pill. I'm sorry. Now, if we want to try the pill today, tomorrow, some eucalyptus and sarsaparilla and da da da, and we're gonna try some herbal something and wean them onto herbs, but they're gonna be observed, right? To make sure they don't try to kill nobody, then hey, I'm all for it. But I don't know. See, the thing that Brother B2 said, which is true, the difference between someone being depressed today, oh, I'm depressed, I lost my job, me and my boyfriend broke up, to I have major depressive disorder, I'm clinically depressed, is when it has an impact on your functioning. That's what makes a difference, right? I break up my boyfriend, I'm still going to work. I'm not about to lose my bag because of him. Do you see what I'm saying? But there's people where your depression gets to a point where your functioning is like you don't want to go to work. You're not taking a bath. You're not eating. You're losing weight. You're not sleeping. Like every aspect of your life is being impaired, that you get this help. So in the regard where safety becomes an issue, I don't know, panel. What do y'all think about our community's attitude towards this from pharmaceuticals?
So what, like medication in the case where safety is a concern?
Yes.
I think like, yeah, like, I mean, treatment certainly, whether that's therapy or actual medication. I guess it's case by case, innit? And like, yeah, if they're a threat, because that's how they deal with the mental health, innit? Like, if you're a threat to yourself or threat to others. Otherwise, if you want to keep it as your own problem, it's your own problem, innit? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, as long as you're not a threat to yourself or threat to others. You know what I mean? But I don't know, man, because a lot of them, I don't know enough about the medication that happens in mental health institutions. I think I've heard about things like liquid kosh in police stations, and that just kind of turns you into a vegetable. And I don't know if that's really treatment. I don't know if it's fair
Oh,
to
like it's something to
subject
subdue
some.
people? Like if they're
Yeah,
being
I
resistant or
don't know if.
something?
Yeah, especially if there's like a physical threat associated with their sort of behavior. But I don't know if it's fair to like sort of subject someone who has got an illness, because remember, as far as mental health is concerned, it's an illness as opposed to a crime, although it can lead you to commit crimes, but arguably out of your control. And so we should be looking to treat. So I don't know if like giving someone liquid caution, just turning their life into something of a vegetable state. I don't know if that's ethically correct. I don't know where the lines are on that, but of course we need to be like removing risk to others, and to themselves as far as reasonable. I don't know. I don't know the different types of like pills and the effects that they have on the user to really talk on it. But if it's that kosh thing, like put it this way, if it was one of my kids who had mental health, that kosh thing, I'm not with that. That's not
None
gonna work
about a.
for
I
me.
don't even know what that is. That
It
Kush
just
sounds like.
liquid kosh.
Hmm.
I think it just like makes you not be able to move or do nothing. Your eyes are open and you're breathing.
How
That's about
long?
it. I don't know, but you're gonna get every time.
That sounds
Every time
crazy.
they feel you need a top up, you're gonna get it, and it's all down to human error in it. So you'll get as much as
Nah,
man's
that
feeling.
sounds crazy.
Well, boy, it's the right place to sound
So
crazy. You get me?
yeah, no. What? So I had placed a question in the chat, but I don't think anyone. I wanted to know what is the chat? What is it? What is the chat's attitudes about medication for mental health conditions, and also anyone else on the panel? I'm sorry, witness, non ether. I think scattered
Yeah,
answers.
sorry, I popped away for a quick sec, but yeah, bless up family as always. But I just want to know. Obviously, I know what's about mental health and so forth, but and I may have missed the different definitions because I know there's different categories and so forth, and I know I've heard schizophrenia. I know you broke down a couple other ones, right?
Yeah, mood
Yeah,
disorders, which depression and bipolar disorder falls underneath
psychotic.
that. Psychotic disorders, eating
Yeah.
disorders.
So what I wanted to ask, and I don't know if I'm going left a bit, but you don't know. Because I remember, especially when I was younger, growing up, we felt that a lot of black people were basically sectioned or, whatever the terminology was, not necessarily for the right reasons. Yeah. Or
Mm-hmm.
no, let me reverse a little bit. So I guess, do you think that we're black people and other, I don't want to say black and white, whatever, but I can't think of a better word right now. But do you think that we are gauged in the same way in terms of mental illness?
To the extent where maybe we're targeted.
To the extent where maybe either we're targeted or we still are not. And again, I'm probably going back a little bit, a few years back,
Mm,
but targeted or not necessarily understood in the
absolutely.
in that mental capacity. You get me? Because I'm saying, like, when I was growing, I know a lot of people were just overly I don't know, either overly spiritual or just overly just heightened. Their senses were
Mm.
just overly heightened, and just over heightened, and I don't know, man.
I
But I
think
just
those
think
are
that
rare
coming up,
cases. Sorry, sis. I think those are rare
they may
cases.
be
Yeah.
rarer now.
Yeah.
They may be rarer now, but back in the day, I'm telling you, they were more common because, and I guess really, I suppose what I'm trying to bring up is that, a lot of black people had a more what would you call it? I don't want to say spiritual. I want to say, do you know what I mean? Just a
Yeah, I
higher.
get what you're saying. I get
You
what
get
you're
what I'm saying
saying.
to you? And
Yeah,
it wasn't at the time acknowledged, appreciated, understood, or whatever. You with me?
yeah, yeah,
And then
Mm-hmm.
because they don't really understand the one and two things, the first thing they do is juice up a person, and then it just becomes a down. Do you know what I mean? A downward spiral kind of thing. Because there weren't
yeah,
necessarily nothing wrong with them. They were just overly, heightened. Like my
yeah,
granny, she would have been one of them. She lived in England. They probably would have tried to do her like that because she's they was just overly heightened. I can't even explain it any better, man. But I don't want to say she's, you know what I mean. I don't want to use the term I see dead people, but I'm trying to make the people them understand what I'm saying. But yeah, man, just over heightened. That's the only word I can think of at the moment. But sorry if I've
Well,
taken it right field.
if that I would say um I would say that most, if we stick to the point that it will have to um impact their functioning, then um so like if if someone was overly heightened to the point where they had non-audible speech, that like they could not speak regularly, for anyone to unintelligible speech, we couldn't understand what they were saying because they speaking to people in the cosmos somewhere, you know what I mean, like I don't know, like, and we just they probably would get that diagnosis, like if they can't,
No,
but
no,
I
I'm talking about more in terms of like people hearing.
No, I mean, for the most part, even in the DSM, it will tell you, it will discourage you from going to schizophrenia if someone says that they speak to God, because people speak to God. People they see angels and things like that. So that alone, now someone saying, "I am Jesus." See what I'm saying? Like that may, and then you start saying, "Look at him. That's Paul, my disciple." You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of where it
But
will.
sis, I'm telling you, back in the days, people were locked up for things like that,
Well, I mean,
hearing
sis, no,
voices.
I mean, I understand that. I'm talking about like we talking about the black. I don't know. I can't. Back
I'm
in the days,
talking
they thought
about black
no, no. But I'm
people,
saying back in
sis.
the day, what I'm saying is back in the day, treatment for mental health was shocking people's brains.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, so like we have definitely come a long way from there. Like, if they still doing that, putting that little helmet thing and shocking your head and opening up your brain and playing around and stuff, they used to do all of that kind of stuff.
No, yeah, yeah. I hear that still.
Especially the black people, because the idea was that we didn't feel pain and we had higher pain thresholds. So like they wouldn't even use anesthesia sometimes. They'd be doing crazy stuff on us. So like yeah, that I think now currently they would definitely move away from just jumping to, oh, you're schizophrenic because you're talking about you were praying and you saw angels and such and such. I mean, people who meditate see that kind of stuff. If that is happening, I would say get a second opinion. Don't receive. Everybody out there, the family out there, don't you don't got to take that. You can see someone else.
Oh, I hear that still. And like I said, that was definitely probably bringing up, you know, diagnosis of the past still. Although to be honest though, I've got a friend, a very good friend, and he was sectioned years and years and years ago, and they've still got him juiced up even now. And basically, he ain't ever coming off of that thing.
Oh.
The way I see it, yeah, when I was saying, yeah, that it's probably a rare occurrence. Yeah, what I mean is, like, for that supernatural stuff that we might be talking about, yeah, I think it's definitely less common. There's no dispute about that. Like, yeah, we all dream, but for us to say we have those supernatural encounters, it's few of us out of the many. Nah, I think where, even though that's the case, we still see evidence of like our community being targeted early to be diagnosed, early to be labeled, to be signposted and taken down. It's almost like the pipeline, either to prison or to, mental health. Like you see it in schools as well. And the issue I think it is, yeah, is because a large part of mental health is down to social behaviors and the way a person behaves. Yeah. Now, in a school, obviously the other part to that is the neurological side and the biological side. In a school, the practitioners there are teachers and they don't have the skills to assess the neurological, biological side. What they do have the skills to assess is the behavioral. Now, due to their biases, I feel they come in with certain associations where certain communities already have certain behavioral traits like anger or they're loud or da. And I think these things they contribute to their readiness to like sort of label a child from our community in a type of way. I think this contributes to what we see and what we have seen in our people being quick. And you see it in schools. I mean, but as far as I think as well, what you're saying, sis, about the supernatural stuff, seeing things that might be hard to explain. I think in the past, yeah, you're right. Like for one reason or another, our testimonies have in the past been less credible than others. Like, and as well with developments in technology and understanding and information, people are able to talk about things that if you spoke about it time ago, you would have been treated different. It would have been seen differently. Like Dave Icke talks about certain things, astral projection, in a day now where that's okay, but back in the day, it was looked at differently. So,
You talking about you leaving your body and all of this stuff.
yeah,
Back in the day, you probably would have ended up in a hospital somewhere.
trust me. So, yeah, I do definitely think though. I think it's probably common in ethnic minorities in general, though. Being quick to be labeled or diagnosed with some sort of mental health. Because again,
I
like
disagree, man.
you don't think it's ethnic minorities.
Nah, I would definitely say that we're more primed than other, like certainly Asians or like even Turkish. Yeah, I would say that we're, because even with what you just said in terms of behavior and so forth, you know what I mean? Like in terms of, you know what I mean, that sort of diagnosis, those assumptions and stereotypes, I think they definitely come into play. We can even see that just even in terms of how the police, you could argue, deal with certain people. You know what I mean? Like
I kind of,
Yeah.
I think I kind of agree with what Naith is saying. I feel like in ethnic minorities, I kind of agree with both of y'all. I think in ethnic minorities, they, well, no, I think people in general experience mental health, right? How that presents itself, like the specific behaviors that we see are going to look different because you can't help being born into the culture that you're in, right? So, I think that, like, let's say the feeling of depression, right? There's the textbook image of this is what depression looks like. This is how people respond when they're sad. But as a Black clinician, I have my own lens of what depression looks like in Black skin, in poverty, in an urban setting with you know who have ongoing traumatic experiences. So you might have depression and you're not being traumatized on a consistent basis, and then you have someone who's depressed, right, for whatever reason, and now they're going to sleep and they're hearing gunshots, or they're going, or somebody that they know was stabbed, or somebody that they know was murdered, or they were walking home from school, walking with their friend, and their best friend got robbed right there in front of them. Like those are ongoing traumas that, so you may see different behaviors. You may see wetting of the bed. Nobody's gonna say this child wet in the bed, they depressed. You see what I'm saying? Like no one's gonna say they depressed. But maybe in another environment where you don't have all of these constant traumas, this person, oh, I lost my appetite, I don't want to eat. So the depression may be manifested that way. You know, I look at how angry it appears that Black people can be, like just very angry. And it's like, where is that coming from? Why do we see this? What is this what feeling, what emotion, what condition is this a manifestation of? And perhaps that's trauma. Perhaps that's a level of
I don't think we have to
depression.
look too far for that, Lucis. I mean, especially if we were to even just to take America as an example. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think many of us are suffering from, I don't know, um, sorry, PTSD or whatever. In terms of, if I was, in fact, you lot talk. Let me just check the definition of PTSD, because I'm sure many of us are suffering from that. Do you know what I mean? Just from our recent history and so forth. Most people have not been, what's the word? Counseled or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And then obviously children have just had children that had children. And I just think a lot of shit is just basically downloaded personally. So that's why I think, you know what I mean? You got a lot of angry people running around that don't quite know why they're angry or can't quite, do you know what I mean? Decompartmentalize their anger and so forth and so on. So
We
that's
have
what
Annabelle Vastrill was made a comment talking about are people under a spell, mind control, MK. I don't know if that's Make Ultra. It's a lot family.
MK Ultra.
Oh,
I'm presuming, I haven't read it, but I'm presuming he's talking about MK. Hold on, let me check.
see, I don't even know who MK Ultra is, so I was just like, huh?
Let me check.
But maybe they were responding to someone else.
I was just
And it says Steppers was just talking about something similar. I don't know who Steppers is, but I'm glad that people are talking about mental health and talking about, how can we help our family? And I guess we gotta first understand it. We gotta first accept it, because acceptance. I don't know about you guys, but my family definitely wasn't. When I say my family, I'm talking about the elders. They were not just not really accepting of a person in the family having any kind of emotional difficulties. There is an expectation of them to just develop tough skin, tough life out. You're not going to no doctor. You're not talking to nobody. You're not. I don't know, y'all.
But
Was you
I
on
think
that?
that's one of our I think that's one of our drawbacks in a way. Constantly having to be strong and not showing weakness. And again, I know that goes back to you know what I mean? That goes back to slavery and that, mum. I'm telling you. And that's what I'm saying, because even if you go way, 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 quay back, yeah, it could be argued. And let me at least talk for Jamaica, definitely, yeah. Before black folk went to Jamaica to be slaves, it was Indian folk. You with me? Yeah. But apparently they were too weak and they did it out and whatever. And in comes us strong fucking black folk. You with me? I'm being slightly facetious, people, but I'm telling you something, man. Sometimes it's not always necessarily good to seem or be strong, man. I'm telling you, but I'm just going anyway. Hold on, flashbacks. I'm just looking for PTSD symptoms. So go on, talk, family. Sorry, 1 second.
I got it. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, go true, man. And if not, yeah, go true still.
All right, then, cool. So, post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is a condition that can develop following a traumatic and/or terrifying event, such as a sexual or physical assault, the unexpected death of a loved one, or a natural disaster. People with PTSD often have lasting and frightening thoughts and memories of the event and tend to be emotionally numb. And I think this is where maybe it tied in with what was being said about MK Ultra. For people that don't know, MK Ultra is like a theory of this mind control thing. But the people that use like do the mind control, they will use a traumatic event, often in a young child, and then try to implant a new personality trait. The idea is that when a young child goes through trauma as a coping mechanism, they block it out, which allows for them to create a new sort of entity where they don't have to acknowledge the other one. And like the MK Ultra people take advantage of this by like creating triggers that like will make them snap in and out of a character at desire. That's the idea as far as I understand it. But again, it's reliant on that instance of trauma. It thrives on that trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily describe our experience necessarily as MK Ultra to how I understand MK Ultra to be, but definitely PTSD. I mean, I think all the kind of definitions that you read out, I think, yeah, I think that can come under our experience definitely, man. Sexual, whatever, not whatever. Yeah, I mean, no. What
Yeah,
does the family
definitely.
think? Yeah,
Some
and
sort
then
of
I'm
triggers.
saying that it wasn't cured, or do you know what I mean? We just obviously went from one state to another, just basically DIYing it, yeah. And yeah, here we are in 2019, man. And
Do you
but
think we
what I
can
would
even have?
also say,
Sorry, I
yeah,
was just
go
gonna
on,
say,
babe.
do you think we can also have generational trauma? Like, so
Of
because
course,
yeah, because I think I've
yes,
seen it. Here's the thing. It's like
that's what I'm
because our
saying.
parents were traumatized and like we've inherited traits of that trauma and it's just passing on and passing on.
That's what I'm saying, though, because we now know about DNA and them thing there and how certain things can be downloaded, this, that, and the other. Then that's only obvious, man. I mean, some people you can see it.
Mhm. I think I think they have I want to say it's called epigenetics. If
Okay.
I'm not I'm not looking at my I think it's called epigenetics.
Was that like hereditary based mental health or something?
The study of
Like you,
changes in organisms caused by modifications of genes expressed rather than alteration of the genetic code. Um, no, that's it. It goes into more of you transgenerational epigenetic inheritance is transmitted of information from one generation of the organism to the next that affects the traits of offspring without alteration of the primary structure. So pretty much, I want to say where someone, they had like regular teeth, right? And
yeah,
then when they was a child, they fell on a floor and hit their mouth, and then they tooth spread because they was kind of young, so they ended up getting a gap.
mm,
And then when they got older and they had kids, the kid came out with a big gap, and it's like, how you get a gap? Like I didn't have a gap until I fell. Your mom doesn't have a gap. Where's this gap come from? And it was like, the gap came from the trauma, the physical trauma that the dad experienced. Um, so, and I guess if it can happen on in that way where you can pretty much pass on the manifestation of the trauma, then um, people getting raped, victimized, whipped, and so forth. Imagine them passing trauma to their offspring and to their offspring and to their offspring. So, I think there's some validity to this kind of fluffy talk that people want to say is fluffy when you say I am my ancestors. We literally mean that, like, that their genetics is passed on through us. Um, so yeah,
mm,
just want to throw that piece in there.
yeah. I think even if like, especially like considering so much of mental health is behavioral, or at least that's how we see the symptoms. Like when we draw on examples like family trees that there's a consistent pattern of them going to prison, for instance, which might point to some sort of behavioral pattern, um, and also maybe go some way in supporting the idea that it is passed on in the genetics. Yeah, I think it makes sense. It's definitely plausible. Definitely makes sense. And as well, I guess even on a behavioral level, if your parent has got certain mental health traits, you're likely to pick up and learn those traits, even if it's not on a biological level, just on a habit level. You know what I mean? What you've been shown as coping
Yeah, monkey
mechanisms
see,
or way of,
monkey do, innit?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Bless up, brother
Absolutely.
witness.
That's a witness.
Hello, hello. Just got disconnected for a bit. You asked a question a while ago about how the community could better itself with well being and mental health, and you mentioned food as well, whether they
Yeah.
could watch the kind of food that they ate.
Mm.
And I thought, would that be would you mean, are you talking about educating people on what types of stuff to eat and not eat in case it causes mental problems? Is that what you meant? Partly what you meant?
Well, yeah, I think there is again, I'm not a specialist or in any way a practitioner, but I think there is when we're looking at mental health, lifestyle is an issue in it, and like healthy eating is a part of that. Um, Things they say that will promote good mental health is exercise, activity, engagement, social interaction, but as well as healthy living a healthy lifestyle, which includes healthy eating. Um, I think it's fair to say if you eat like a lot of fast food, junk food, greasy food, it's gonna have an effect on your psyche to an extent. How it has an effect, I myself don't know. But I just wonder if there's more guidance on that, or if there's more we could be doing as a community.
I don't know. That's a tough one. It's like I wouldn't know how you could re-educate people on what to. I don't know how you could do that.
Well, I mean, there are an increasing number of what people call wellness centers. I think that the community is starting to grow. I mean, it's starting to become more interested in that. I think that people could get recommendations from their primary doctors to see nutritionists, and then a nutritionist would be a licensed professional that can make recommendations as well for healthy eating. But they have wellness centers that are kind of like a conglomerate of different types of people who have their own specialties of what wellness would look like. So there may be yoga classes, there may be, you know, for JJ steaming and such, acupuncture. They may be,
Yeah,
what's the thing called? Air candling things. They may have the
aromatherapy.
Reiki people. They may have like all these different specialists in one place, and all together it would be called a wellness center. And you can just kind of, it
Mm.
may be a herbalist there that to help and make recommendations and monitor your diet and stuff like that. So those places do exist, but I will say that we definitely need a lot more.
Is
Um,
that like what Nature Boy does, or is that something else?
I don't think he has a censor. I think Nature Boy just live out in the nature. I mean, I don't know. I don't really watch him like that, but I believe that's what he does live out in the nature. But I think that on some level, right, even the basic, without saying, oh, be a thisitarian, thatitarian, this, whatever, whatever, right? All of us could educate our loved ones about the impact of certain things on their mood. It is not saying it's going to give you this disorder, but someone who already has like a nervous worrying, anxiety type of life, type of way of being, should not be taking in a bunch of caffeine. You see what I'm saying? So even something like saying, caffeine can increase your feelings of anxiety. You might not want to take that. Someone who's hyper and has difficulty focusing should not be taking in a bunch of like white sugar, like sweet, sugary products. So, you know what I'm saying? So things like that will definitely be counterproductive to whatever treatment they're on, whether if it's ADHD medication or if they're doing some mindfulness meditation type stuff. Um, so that's like, ways of looking at whatever the condition is, and then looking at the foods that will kind of contribute to those symptoms. That makes
Right,
sense.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it does actually. It does, especially when you mentioned the coffee and the caffeine. It seems like very obvious. Yeah, it
Right.
makes sense. Yeah, the caffeine, that's going to exasperate your situation. Yeah, and of course with sugar, yeah, all that stuff you mentioned. It's very obvious. It's just a case of how would you tell people? But you mentioned that there are wellness and well-being centers. You said that exist in the US. Like, have you seen them? You've been in them as well.
I've been to some, like, it was like a smaller version. I think they had a colon what was it, colonic therapy, acupuncture, and Reiki. So they only had like three different things. It wasn't like a yoga studio or anything like that that was attached to it. Um, yeah, and all of the practitioners were Black people. I was like, oh, me and a lady talked about business afterwards. I was like, really congratulating her because she was like a new, she quit her job and started a business. So, um, was showing her some love in that department. But yeah.
That's good. It'd be good to know that we can find if there are any like that in the UK run by Black people. I don't know, but yeah, that would definitely be a solution. And like you mentioned, it seems that solution's already been implemented in certain parts of the US. But it'd be good if I don't know if they exist in the UK. I don't know. Maybe they'd be part of that. Remember last week when we had that whole was it last week or 2 weeks ago? We had that whole discussion about the whole hair and beauty. No, it was on Kushti's show, sorry. And that lady was showing the services she provided. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it could be done through the whole hair and beauty thing, that we would have there would be people who would provide those extra kind of facilities, because that could be looked at as health, with the, I don't know, you just, maybe that's the way you could try and sell it in the UK. I don't know. They obviously sell it differently in the States, but I don't know. It's just trying to find a way that would make it attractive for Black people to go to try and better themselves. I don't know, so they wouldn't feel suspicious. So what did they do in America that didn't make Black people feel suspicious about it? It was just what? It just looked
Oh no, I wouldn't
welcoming.
say that like, oh, there's like overwhelming droves of Black people going out getting these services. I'm not gonna try to make it seem like that's how it is, because America we have like the worst diet. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're like beating everyone in obesity. So definitely not America leading the charge on healthy eating and healthy living. I do think that it has its pockets. Has its pockets of people who are out jogging, and they're out doing marathons and riding their bikes for miles and miles, and eating lettuce and tomatoes every day. Um, yeah, I'm talking about.
All right, so yeah, okay, okay. I get. It's like there's this knowledge that it just comes back not really being able. I guess we're just struggling to answer that question. How would be like draw more and more. Well, we don't even know for well, I don't know. Mental health. I guess you need someone who's more what's the word I'm looking for? Like a psychiatrist, because maybe they might. Because the question is, what's wrong with the actual medicines that can be prescribed to people? Are we saying that those medicines cause more side effects and damages than actually provide solutions? And
I think that's what people feel like. But I think, I mean, as a community, we're so far away from the sciences, I suppose, that we are quite skeptical from, you know, even when we have a conversation about technology, from technology to biology to chemistry, I think we're very skeptical of all these types of areas. So, especially when it comes to pharmaceuticals and medicines, and I would say to good reason to some extent. I mean, there are people who have that. I mean, there's been many cases of people who made the claim of, you know, they were fine until they went into the mental health institution, and then they got drugged up, and then when they came out, they were never the same. And I think that kind of idea prevails amongst the community that there's something being done to people in these institutions or by these injections. Yes, I think it would definitely help to have somebody who understands like the pharmaceutical side of the medicines and who could break it down and explain what is actually being done when these things are given and what kind of things can be done. You know, if somebody actually just has, you know, this chemical imbalance in their brain, which makes them, you know, react in quick ways that, you know, they need some kind of treatment, then I have no idea.
from your experience, not well, I'm just asking. Would you know? Have we discussed like weed, or skunk? Does that affect the brain at all? Does anybody know?
I mean, I think we discussed it today.
Yeah, I don't think we discussed it as far as if it has like permanent changing, altering effects. We No, we haven't discussed that, and my short answer would be that I think it would be difficult to say that it has permanent effect if you're saying that it's primarily just THC, just like, you know, regular weed. Obviously, if you're admixing anything, that's going to, you know, be a different story. And there are certain drugs that do, you know, cause more permanent damage even after like one use. So I don't know, like, I don't know how we would like research that to say like each time someone used it, it wasn't something that was mixed, or each time they used it, it was. You know what I mean? Like, I think that would be kind of one of the barriers to actually doing a study like that, unless it was like a closed study, you know, where the researchers provided the marijuana and the only time they used it was, you know, when they came into the marijuana center or something like that. But to my knowledge, its effects are, you know, short term, temporary.
Short term. When you say short, what the insanity you mean, or which parts?
I mean, yeah, meaning the high that you feel, or the effects of the marijuana are short term, meaning they do wear off. Like, you know, like drinking alcohol is short term. Your body processes the alcohol, and then eventually your body doesn't have alcohol in it. So it's kind of the same. Your body metabolizes it, and then no more effects.
Because the reason I asked, that's a big thing within most Black communities, the consumption of certain drugs. Some of them are obvious. We know that they were bad, like we see the 1980s crack cocaine. So we can point the finger, even if we're not like qualified as medical, you know, employees. We can say what crack cocaine causes problems, obviously mentally. obviously socially and whatnot, but we can see what it's doing mentally to people. Heroin can do the same thing. But one thing which is very popular amongst the community, and since we're talking about the community in this, is the consumption of weed. Well, not consumption, the use of marijuana. And it'd be good to because I hear things in certain TV shows that it causes problems, and then people argue that it doesn't cause problems. So it's just like, how would you even, if it was proven that it did cause mental problems, how on earth would you convince people within the community not to like use anymore? That's the $1 million question. It's like, how would you even do that?
Yeah, witness. I think definitely witness is right to say that here in the UK, and I think maybe across the world, there have been questions and even some studies that people have tried to put across in this idea of you know, that marijuana is somehow a gateway drug to other drugs, or that marijuana links between marijuana and or what they say, certain strong strains of marijuana and psychosis or mental health issues. But yeah, I think a lot of the studies have been inconclusive. They haven't put any sort of confirmed link. Do you know what I mean? I think a lot of it has been like I say, none of it's been inconclusive just yet. I think there are possibilities that the very strong cannabises, especially in the new days, these GMO cannabises grown in labs, can be causing issues. But I do think if you look across the board, historically, across the length of time, marijuana has not had a history of causing mass issues at all in terms of mental health. And I think it's probably one of the things that people would actually use as a medication in many cases. I think there are cases and there are issues where somebody has already suffering with a mental health issue or underlying thing from previous family that can definitely be commanded by the strong strains of marijuana. But yeah, I think it's definitely overplayed by people who would like to see marijuana kept illegal.
Right. I think the mere fact that it's starting to be legalized more and more, you know, and it's used for chronic pain, sleep disturbance. So someone who is, you know, has a medical diagnosis of insomnia, they can get a prescription of marijuana. Um, you know, something terminal, cancer, something like that, and their body is always in pain and so forth. Um, you know, knee replacement, hip replacement, things where, you know, rheumatoid arthritis, your body is constantly just riddled with pain and things like that. Yeah, I think it is, you know, they're actually prescribing marijuana, medical marijuana. So, like Scott had said, it's not these, you know, extra, I don't know what they call it, funky or extra strong strands, but I guess what you would just say like your regular green bud or so. I don't know. Um, and they get them from dispensaries, and they're literally treating their pain with it. So perhaps the research, like you said, is inconclusive. So they're, you know, using it for its medicinal benefits. Um, but you know, you bring up a good point as far as that being something, a form of treatment that our community definitely approves of, right? Because they don't approve of the pills.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yes, yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
They don't really approve of the pills. Um,
But there's something else I noticed when I used to live in there were certain parts of London I used to live in which had a large black population. And living there after a while, I could tell who the crazy people were. I can tell when people are mentally unstable because it seemed they used to release a lot of people back into the community. It was a big thing back in the 90s. And there used to be a guy called John Major who was prime minister of the Tory party. And one of the problems they had was they were releasing people who were mentally unstable back into the community. And people believed it was because of they were cutting costs. They didn't want to have to look after them. So they created this program back into the community, reintroducing them into the community. And it reached a stage where I was living, I used to see a lot of people, Black people who were mentally ill, who were walking on the streets, talking to themselves, not looking after themselves, looking really beat up. I remember once I was on a bus which got held because there was a guy walking around with a gun. It was probably a fake gun, but he held up the bus. And I used to see him all the time in Streatham High Road, walking up and down, acting crazy. So it seems, but of course, the reason I mention it is because when I go to certain other types of neighborhoods, I wouldn't see so many of their own people who are mentally unstable walking on the streets. So it's almost as if, I don't know, I just almost got the impression with Black people, it was almost a case of you either locked them up, you either misdiagnosed easily and you just locked them up for a long time, or you deliberately misdiagnosed and you just released them into the community. And either way, it was, I don't know, it was causing more of a problem because within the community, there wasn't like a kind of social grounding to look after people who are mentally ill. That was kind of something that you left to the system to deal with in a way. And I guess it's a dream, but it would be good if we could have a way of helping our own people who are mentally disturbed. Because I suspect the other communities, they have their way of doing it, whether it's those amazing Jews, the Jews do it. But I think with us, I think we rely on the system to do it. I don't know what it's like in America. Maybe in America, it's more and more Black Americans are becoming more independently minded of the system. But in the UK, unless I'm wrong, it seems that we rely on the system, which is done through the council. And so, I suspect there's a lot of misdiagnosing going on. And I think until we find a way to like create our own institutions, the way we do like with homeschooling and whatnot, until we do that, I think Black people are going to get the short end of the stick when it comes to this whole mental health discussion. But I don't know how we're going to be able to set up our own, wellness centers or mental health centers. I don't know how we're going to do that. But until we do that, we're just going to be exploited. That's what I think. I was going to ask you, Melanie, to Goddess, in your experience when you were you ever afraid at all when you were dealing with, or did you?
That's a good question. I have to think of this one situation was very, very early. I think that one. So my, being transparent, my skill level and my education was not there. I was like my, introductory into the field. I'm still trying to see if this is a field I want to go into. And I think my supervisor pretended she didn't understand me when I told her that I didn't have my 4-year degree at the time. But I was very honest on the interview. She hired me and then later said, I need a copy of your degree. And I said, I don't have a degree. She was like, oh, I hope we don't get in trouble. Da, da, da. So anyway, my position was to go to clients' homes and basically check in on how they're doing with their symptoms. I would work with them on certain skills, like if they and then I would kind of just document, like if they were hearing voices, ask them how much they was hearing the voices, what did the voices say, da, da, da. And I would document that and, you know, pretend, just take the suggestions of whatever the therapist said. So if the therapist told them to do their deep breathing or whatever, I would ask them, hey, have you done your deep breathing? Do you want to try it with me? And that would be kind of like what I would do. But I wasn't their therapist. So I had this lady, and I'm gonna call her Susan, right? I had this lady, Susan, and Susan, she used to want a session with me when I come to her house. And when she came into the clinic, she wanted a session with me, which she really wasn't supposed to. She was really kind of demanding. But I kind of got accustomed to Susan. You know what I mean? I was just like, all right, if you read her file, you would be scared out of your wits, right? But every time I met her, she was always pleasant. This one day, I go to her house and she's staring and she's not blinking. And I'm like, what's going on, Miss Susan? And she's like old enough to like be my mom. And she's like, look here, melanated. I'm gonna kill that motherfucker. I was like, what? So I'm trying not to like freak out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, I'm gonna kill that motherfucker. I'm gonna kill. She just kept saying it, right? So now I'm freaking out because my little 3 months of training has taught me that she's making homicidal threats, right? Y'all know the lingo. She's checking homicidal threats. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, what are you
So,
gonna do there?
so my job, this is like way back in the day. Like y'all remember Nextel phones and they chirping and all this stuff. My job gave me a Nextel phone, so I'm chirping, trying to get my supervisor, like a walkie-talkie, like, hey, Mayday, Mayday, come back to me. Shit is popping off at work. And my supervisor said, you have to do a risk assessment. I'm like, I don't even know what a risk assessment is. So I'm feeling like, why am I at this job? I'm not prepared. I got it together. And I asked the lady real casually, because one of the issues is if the person has a plan. If they have a plan of how they're going to kill someone, no, you gotta get the cops. You have to handle this like it could go down. Because if I just say she's bullshitting, jump in my car and drive home, and she kills that man, now I'm liable. My agency is liable. On top of that, I could have prevented a death, right? So I said, Miss Susan, hush, because I was in the South now. So I'm like, hush, girl, you ain't gonna kill nobody. How you gonna kill him? She said, I'm gonna wait until he go to sleep and I'm gonna cut his throat. Oh shit! Right? Like, I'm like, oh my God, she's really thought about this. She's gonna kill him. She's sitting here. So
Yeah,
long story short,
premeditated, isn't that what they say?
long
Premeditated.
story short, right? She ended up going to the hospital. I ended up calling the police, and she realized that, like, I told her, I said, you're going to have to go to the hospital. And she was like, well, you know what? That's what's best, because if I stay, like, she really was homicidal. Like, all she could think of was killing him. Guess what she was upset about? He
What?
took her, he took her food stamp card and sold all her food stamps at the beginning of the month, so she wouldn't have any food for the entire month.
Whoa.
And and the way that this is her husband, her legal husband, like not no boyfriend. That's her husband. She was like, he's going to be dead. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, so that was a time. Thank goodness I wasn't scared for my own life, but I was scared of the responsibility of being a mental health person working with her and ensuring that I handled it properly. That was really scary.
So she willingly accepted. Wow.
Yeah, when the police came, she wasn't trying to resist or anything. She got in the police car and they took her to so that's what's called an involuntary hospitalization, because she definitely like didn't sign herself. And if I would have just left and said, "Hey, I need you to go check yourself in the hospital," she wouldn't have went.
Wow. Well, you handled that. Wow.
Mhm.
Because you just
That's why I was
prevented a
like,
murder from taking place, a possible murder.
yeah, it was definitely like, I just thought I was gonna just like help a little bit of kids and stuff, like
So,
I didn't
so
know I was gonna be doing all of this.
what did they do to her? And then was she pumped with drugs
Yes, yes, but
okay,
they of course they're not gonna say it that way. They're gonna call it that they stabilized her, right?
right.
Um,
Mm.
And all fairness, so what do you do when you have an an actively homicidal person who already on record has auditory and visual hallucinations? I think when I'm not going to say in every situation it warrants the use of drugs, but if giving someone this drug can make someone not homicidal, I don't know. I mean, the community isn't coming back with a different an alternative. So if it's gonna save my life, I'm gonna say y'all should have gave it a medication. You see what I'm saying? Like it. What is the alternative?
That's a good. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be qualified to make that call, but
I mean, I
because
don't
of
even
course,
see an
because I take
alternative
it with the
being
drugs.
spoken of.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
because I'm assuming with the drugs, it's you see the effect straight away. I'm guessing it nullifies the person and makes them more subdued. That's why they're using it. I don't know. I mean, from your experience, when they used it on her, did you see her afterwards?
Yeah, I saw her maybe a week later.
And what
She
did it
was
make?
she
Was she
was
more?
she was. I mean, she was still her like outgoing self. She just wasn't homicidal anymore.
Okay.
And um, when I spoke with her, she basically said that her hallucinations weren't as profound as they can be around a time when things are heightened. You know, I mean, I couldn't imagine hearing something in my head that I can't I can't make it away or make the volume go down or make the people stop talking. I couldn't imagine that. So I don't know what that would do to your behavior.
Hmm. It would be good to know what they actually put in the drugs that because it's funny we're talking about this like at one point there's this kind of governmental movement against certain drugs, but at the same time other drugs are being approved to be injected into people. It would be good to know what kind of drugs they are injecting into people with mental health. Like what's the ingredients? Are they actually do they come from do some of the ingredients come from plants or before they do whatever they do in the laboratories? Because most of the medicines I notice they tend to come from plants. I mean, it's hard to know that because when you look at the ingredients of most medicines, it has all this like uh, chemical type names, chemistry type names. But if you do research on the names that they're given, a lot of them tend to be from plants or herbs. So it'll be interesting to find out the combination of ingredients they're using to inject into people they consider to have mental health problems. It's like, why is it that those herbs and spices, those concoction of herbs and spices is okay to inject into someone with mental health, but other concoctions of herbs and spices is, I don't know, illegal. I don't know. It'd be good to know what kind of ingredients they're using to subdue people. Maybe if he just gave us some weed, she'd be cool. No, probably not. I don't know.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't know if marijuana is used to treat something like schizophrenia. So that particular woman experienced schizophrenia, and um, the symptoms are a little bit more severe, I would think. Seeing things, hearing things. Um, yeah, I just don't know if that's treatable with just marijuana. But if she had another medication, but she still experienced difficulty sleeping, I could see her getting, the prescription for both, something like that.
In this subject, we're talking about what's it, mental health. schizophrenia, obviously you've mentioned, is comes under that. What of the likes of Alzheimer's and dementia?
Yes. Let me go. Let's see. Now you're asking that question. I'm gonna have to go give them a good old book. Because it Alzheimer's and dementia is in a separate category. Um, yeah, it's in a separate category, and the behaviors are similar. One of the without even I don't know where the heck I put the book. Without even seeing the book, I can tell you one of the differences have to do with the onset, right? So most people um, experience like their first psychotic episode at around the age uh, young adulthood, 18, 19, 20, around there, like late teens into early 20s. So for someone to develop schizophrenia at 55, it's more probable that something else has caused that disturbance, and perhaps they don't want to say. Maybe they took some mollies and permanently, you know what I mean, caused some damage. I'm looking through the book now. Whew, I'm out of breath going these damn stairs.
So wait, so you're saying there's a possibility that the use of certain recreational drugs could trigger, or not trigger, but could cause Alzheimer's or dementia?
Permanent. I wouldn't say it would. If it caused symptoms that were similar, the diagnosis would be like medically induced, substance induced dementia. It just wouldn't be dementia. It would be, whomever was treating that person would know that the dementia was through, it was substance induced. Because if you have a 34-year-old sitting in front of you, you're going to be like, how do you have dementia? Oh, substance induced, something like that.
Okay,
That would
all
that
right, I
would
see.
answer.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Page 304. Witness got me flipping through the book. Mm. So this is neurocognitive disorders, and then you would specify if it was so under the category they have the traumatic brain injury, Parkinson's, Huntington's disease, vascular disease, frontal lobar degeneration, Alzheimer's disease, um, multiple etiologies, and then so in the book and look, they have substance slash medication use. So you can have a neurocognitive disorder, and then you would specify that it was a substance or medication use, which contributed, which caused that. See what I'm saying? See, melanated know a little something.
Okay, I see. All right. Thanks for that. Okay. So did because I wasn't here a while about 20 minutes ago. I got cut off. Were you when we talked about mental health, did we talk about people who another form of mental health is like aggressive behavior? Would that be deemed as mental health? People who are being aggressive and violent. Does that go into the realm of mental health, do you think?
Yes, I would say it definitely goes into mental health. Um, but what I said earlier was that how it's manifested and how it's described in like the diagnostic statistical manual, like this is what depression is, or this is what PTSD is, what I was saying is that we also have to consider culture. So we have to look at these disorders through a cultural lens, right? So someone who has a particular culture where crying is not a large part of their culture, and it's discouraged for people to cry. Well, one of the criteria for that one of the behaviors that they look at to diagnose someone with depression is having crying spells, which is where you are unable to stop yourself from crying. So you could possibly rule out, like, okay, this person, when maybe there's something else that's specific to their culture that they probably wouldn't typically do, and they are doing it, and that's because that's how they're manifesting their depression. So you have to understand the culture, if that makes sense. Like if you're interviewing someone from a culture where they don't look people in the eyes, so during the interview, you're noticing they're not looking at me in their eyes. They're ashamed. Like the way that you have to be able to read it properly and know that this is they're actually showing you respect. It has nothing to do with their mental health. You see what I'm saying? So you have to kind of look at the culture and what the people have gone through and what's typical and what's normal. So for me, anger and depression may not necessarily be a manifestation of out of control behavior, and this person is bipolar. It could be this person is traumatized. This person is experiencing hypervigilance. This person could be depressed, right? And they're kind of grumpy and they're in a bad mood. So it could be a manifestation of a mood disorder, or trauma, which PTSD falls under the anxiety disorders.
And in your experience, do you think there's been a great deal of misdiagnosing, people not looking at the cultural aspect and just coming up to conclusions without not taking that into consideration?
I think there's a lot of reasons to, yes, I think people are misdiagnosed. That does happen. I think it happens on good, a large scale. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And one of them, I would say, is how the system is. Things are so rushed. Um, things are so rushed. It's really difficult to get a full picture of someone to diagnose them. Like for me, when I kind of went through the system and I was able to learn how to do this, right? And people like, oh, I watched the documentary, or oh, I watched this, or I know about this, or I know somebody who has this, and it's just really not so that cookie cutter in order to give a thorough assessment and to give an accurate assessment. I learned that sometimes you have to interview someone 2, 3, 4 times to get a great picture of who they are and what they experience for your diagnosis to be accurate. I'm saying that to say is, do you think that that's happening? That people are sitting before a doctor or a clinician 3 separate visits before they're diagnosed? They're not.
How much? Because I'm guessing it costs. Well, I'm assuming it's probably the cost. They're probably cutting down on costs, so they're reducing the amount of times the patient is interviewed. I'm guessing, or I don't know. I wouldn't know why they're doing it, but it's interesting that from your experience, you're seeing there's a misdiagnosis, which is based on
I mean,
culture.
it's based on culture, and like I said, in doing it so rushed, right? You can miss things. Like it's. I've experienced a lot of pressure in that area of just doing the assessment. Um, I actually had that as my primary job, right? One time for this agency, and One assessment be 3 hours. Could you imagine going to the doctor because you're depressed? You in there from 9 in the morning to the afternoon? You're gonna be like, what in the lady, if you don't stop talking to me? Like, like these clients, they would get so they gotta go to the bathroom. Sometimes they falling asleep. I mean, it's so long. That's doing a thorough assessment. And then my supervisor's like, hey, can you shorten it up a little bit? And I'm like, I'm just getting this person's life story. I'm sorry that they didn't tell me their life story quick enough for you. you know, but was trying to do, a thorough assessment because for me, it's at that particular position, 95% of my clients were black. So am I just going to be like, oh, major depression, oh, schizophrenia, oh, bipolar disorder, like just throwing labels on people? I don't want to do that.
What was the official? I'm curious. What was the official, the title for your role, and the guy who you reported to? What was his position? What was it called? I'm curious.
Diagnostician was the job title. And that just means the person who does the diagnosis. Diagnostician, and I think he's a clinical manager or something like that. But he just wanted me to just go faster. That's pretty much it. And
Why
I
did
think
you have
that
like a big case? You had a big pile of cases you had to look at, or something?
sometimes they're walk-ins. It's all about money. It's all about money, 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 money. So if you can see 3 people in a day, that's if it takes 3 hours, that's 9 hours worth of work that they're trying to get me to do in like 7. And versus me doing 2 assessments, that's 6 hours of work, my 1 hour lunch, and then another hour for documentation or something, a little 30 minutes. You see what I'm saying? They don't want me to do that. They don't want me to chill. They want me to crank it out. That's when you suffer with the quality of work that you're able to do. When we say, like, people are it's really a breakdown in the particular agencies, like how well of a assessment you think you're going to get, and while a person is in jail. They just want to, oh, you depressed, here goes some medicine that's going to calm you down, you won't be getting no fights, there you go. You see what I'm saying? It's just like patching it up.
I don't know. But then, yeah, you just mentioned something which I completely forgot. Of course, there people pay, don't they? Whereas here in the UK, it's probably through what they call National Health Service, which is taxpayers' money. But there, people get insurance to go and see, so it's a business. So the walk-ins, I'm guessing people can just come in and pay. So if you have
Walk-in people still had insurance at my agency. You know, I don't know like what the cost is for like walk-in therapy and out there in the UK. The therapist costs.
from your experience, what would you think you would like to see? I know one thing you've mentioned is that you would like to see cultural and even racial taken into consideration, because it seems there's almost like a racial bias or a cultural bias in the way, like you gave examples, like somebody might not be maintaining eye contact probably within their culture, they look down out of respect, but somebody from another culture who's diagnosing has not taken that into consideration. So it's almost like there has to be cultural, how should I put it?
Like they call it a cultural diversity training.
Okay, all right, they do.
Yeah, they have cultural diversity training, and you know, it's pretty much a course or a training to kind of help people of other cultures understand other cultural norms. And I can't say, you know, how great of a training it is, but you know, because you definitely can see all of the racial problems that we have in the United States. But um, but definitely does exist. I think it needs to be more ongoing. You know, more jobs need to have ongoing training to expose people to different trainings, and I mean different groups of people, and have them share like what what mental health looks like for them. Um, and at this, I think even for people who speak other languages too, you know, because it's not only English speaking people who experience mental health, and a lot of times people who speak other languages don't have enough clinicians that speak their language, and it's an issue. And my
Okay.
there are a lot of Spanish speaking people, and you call on a language line, and you have a random person who's not in the mental health field now translating what you're saying to the person, and then they have to speak to that person. You can't have no therapy session like that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I wouldn't advise it. It's difficult, and it takes away from the personal intimacy client therapist relationship that's supposed to be developing. Because now this person is now disclosing their feelings and their trauma to two people instead of one.
Okay. Seems there's going to be a lot of change that would have to be made. I don't, from what you're saying.
Well, I think you know, because I'm going to I have a maintenance person is on their way to my home, so I'm gonna have to go in a little bit. So I would like to talk about like just um you know, people helping their family members out, because I think that that was one of the questions that B2 asked, like, you know, how can we support, how can we help, you know. And I think that when someone comes in to talk to someone about how they're feeling, it's important that um you validate the person's feelings, right? That's There's nothing like feeling validated. Like, you know, if someone said, "Oh man, you know, I've been feeling, I haven't slept, I haven't eaten in 3 days because I'm so nervous about this, or I'm so such and such, or, you know, I sometimes I get so upset, I just want to just kill myself." Oh, like telling them, like, "Oh no, you don't. You know, you don't want to kill yourself." All they're gonna feel is that, you know, they're not gonna come and talk to you again because you're just gonna dismiss their feelings. Like, those those are some moments there where, you know, we have to kind of recognize that this person is telling you that their mood is impacting their functioning. Like, I can't eat, you know, I'm so fat, I put my finger down my throat, make myself throw up. That's not something to start laughing off. "Oh girl, yeah, you know, you trying to get down into that dress." That's not something to brush off. Like, you know, mental health does exist in our community. So I think that
Sure, I definitely want to hug up all the questions. So I don't know if 90th or 99 or B2 have anything they want to ask you. But I definitely got a lot of info. But
Oh, I mean, you prompted some good discussion, even about the marijuana and the wellness centers and all that kind of stuff too.
Mm. Just off the back of what you just said as well, Sister Melanated. I once went on like a short course to do with mental health, but more particularly on mentalization. And it was basically like what you were saying. It was like sort of how important it is to sort of almost validate and show someone that you are listening, validate their difficulties. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're agreeing with them and saying, I think your assessment of it is right. But sometimes it's just understanding and seeing how they've come to that conclusion. Like, right, I can see where you've gone wrong, or I can see how that made you feel, or I can understand that this has had that effect on you. Like, a lot of the time, people primarily in the first instance just want to be heard and be understood. And if they feel they're not getting that, it just adds to their feeling of isolation, which obviously is not a good factor when we're talking about mental health. We don't want people to feel isolated because the lack of options, because some people make bad decisions. So, but yeah, mentalization. That's what it was called in the course that I was taught it in. So interesting, though.
Yeah, and I think normalizing. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go on, because my whole thing's the next thing altogether. So go on, sis.
Oh, I was gonna say normalizing seeking help would be like another thing I would recommend. Like, I think that many people, they want to get help, but they feel like it would be not accepted culturally. So when it's almost like they want permission. Like they're coming to you and they want you to say, have you might want to talk to someone. And they're gonna be like, yeah, like you like almost like they're getting approval from the community. Like, you ain't gonna lose your black card if you go to therapy. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
because it's shunned so much. Like when you hear people uh uh putting their child on medication, the whole community comes out against that. And it's like, you don't know if this parent did research. You don't know, what other ways that this parent tried, and you actually didn't even ask them, well, have you seen an improvement? The first thing you do is attack the parent, like that ain't what we do, and this whole attitude. It can just, at the end of the day, we're not in that person's shoes as to why they made that decision. For any disorder, anxiety disorder, or, actually, I even think that people approve more of anxiety medication than they do like depression or like ADHD. They definitely approve of, if someone's having a panic attack, I guess maybe it seems more scary or something, they would say, oh, you need some Xanax or something. You need to calm down. But I guess depression, it seemed like all you need to do is just cheer up. You know what I'm saying? Like you're making yourself depressed. What y'all think?
I don't know much about. I don't know. It's hard for me to come up with straightforward. It's a lot more complicated for me to come up with an answer. I've been trying to, but I can't.
So y'all just leaving me out to dry.
Because I'm thinking, what kind of qualifications do I have to come up with? I don't know. I'm just admitting this is beyond me. I don't have solutions for this. I'm just here mainly to learn and ask, get more answers from you.
Dave Chappelle once said something in one of his comedy sketches, yeah. And I found it interesting. He was talking about when he was going through things, had to leave to go to Africa. People were saying he's sick, he's crazy, he's this, he's that. And he made a joke of it. He said something like, "Oh, seems like there's a whole load of crazy, sick people. Is it that the people are sick, or is their environment that's sick?" Do you know what I'm saying? And I think it does kind of like raise a valid point in the whole mental health discussion, as far as is what we're classing as, or how far is what we're considering mental health part of a social construct, i.e., because it doesn't fit in the norm of where we are in the time that we are, it's a mental health, versus in a different situation, is it equally a mental health? And B, how much of our society is actually making us sick, is actually the cause of these outbreaks, these social outbreaks, if you like, or these behavioral outbreaks. You know what I mean? And I don't know the answer to that. To be honest, I think a lot of it is very socially related. But we don't live in a bubble. We don't live in a utopia. We are incredibly exposed. So I don't know if there is any antidote to that. I guess that's just what it is. But, yeah, man.
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to dip out.
All right then. Bless you.
Bless guys.
All right. Bless up,
Peace. Bless up to the family. Bless up to everybody in the chat.
Thanks very much for the information you provided. It was very, very educational and helpful. Melanie, to Goddess.
No problem.
That was another good discussion. Big up everyone. Bless up. And on that note, yeah, we'll probably end it there because we're coming up to the hour mark anyway. So yeah. Actually, before we end it, yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question. What do people think of multiple personality disorder? I guess it's back in line with the MK Ultra sort of discussion, but multiple personality disorder.
It depends how deep you want to take it, because we all have different personalities, different masks we wear. We're a different person when we're at work, when we're at home, when we're alone with ourselves, when we're with friends. So we have different masks anyway. But then what I think what you're talking about is when people have been a deliberate personality has been created by an outside source through.
Well, that would be MK Ultra.
Yeah,
that would be MK Ultra. I guess multiple personality disorder, more specifically, would be more like not having control. I guess you can have an awareness, or maybe you don't have an awareness of the other personalities. I guess when we dip in and out of, like, say, choosing our personality or mask, as you describe it, as a result to the shift in the social environment we're in, that's something we're aware of, and to a degree we have a great level of control because of that awareness. I guess to some degree, like, maybe perhaps we're changing our masks and we're not aware, and that is still down to social environments, i.e. like around certain people, we might not be aware that we're acting a certain way and we've changed. But I think in the multiple personality, like, the reason why I even asked in the first instance is because there's a rapper who committed a double homicide. He killed two of his friends, but I think one of the alibis he was trying to lean on was that he has multiple personality disorder, and it was the other personality that committed the murders, and therefore, as someone with an illness, mental health illness, he shouldn't be treated as a criminal. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know about that. When does multiple personality disorder become multiple personality disorder and not schizophrenia? It's like, I don't know. That's a tough one. But I know what you're saying. I've seen it in court cases. And even if it is proven that the person is mentally unstable, they still get incarcerated, but they get taken to
Mental ward or something.
yes, yeah. So I guess it's just used to either avoid. Well, if you're being cynical, you can say someone is using their lawyer to get that, so that they don't face capital punishment, or they have a lesser sentence in prison. But in regards to the medical diagnosis, I couldn't even begin to discuss how you can ascertain when someone has multiple personality disorder. I can't. I don't know, so I couldn't really.
That time, I think I may have brought up an example, yeah, of, and I can't, like, of something I heard where there was someone who suffered with multiple personality disorder, and when under one personality, he would have an allergy and a severe outbreak to something, whilst when under another personality, he would be totally immune to it. Like,
Wow.
you know what I'm saying? So there's even a like physiological, biological difference to and that's weird.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's fascinating. No, I don't know much about that, unfortunately.
Anonymous says schizophrenia and MPD are different. Can you elaborate on the distinct differences, Anonymous? Specifically, what makes them different? I guess, again, multiple schizophrenia could be like outbreaks of behavior and like, yeah, outbreaks maybe. But MPD, multiple personality disorder, I guess it doesn't even necessarily have to be violent. I guess it's just a different character, a different set of emotions, a different identity, a different name. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'd have to study more to see the separate factors that distinguish them apart from, because I know they have separate names, but I would like to know what actually makes them, because you can sometimes say someone with schizophrenia is behaving, or you have a bipolar, somebody who's bipolar. At one point, their personality and their behavior is different. The next minute, when they become manic depressive, or they have the bipolar without the medicine, their personality changes, and they have a different. But that's not considered multiple personality disorder. That's called bipolar. So there are all these different factors within each of them that separate.
I think they have very like hairline distinctions, and it's making those distinctions that are critical. I think with the bipolar one, as far as I know, it's more related to like mood shifts as opposed to character. Do you know what I'm saying? The impression I get from the multiple personality is the personality is key. Like it's a different, not just like your mood has changed, right? You're going by a different name, you're wearing different clothes, you have different interests, different hobbies, different routines. Do you get what I'm saying? And that's just triggered by whatever is triggered by, but that's a whole different banked identity within, you know what I mean? Whereas the bipolar thing, I think it's like I say, just uncontrollable mood swings, if you like. For I don't know, like you can be really high and like jolly, and then really low. You know what I mean? All in the same personality.
True.
Yeah. But you're right though, with these terminologies, especially how, like, generally speaking, the lack of people's actual knowledge on the terminologies, like I feel like people like we were saying with OCD, people just use it in general terms, and the real hairline distinctions just get missed. Everything gets generalized and bundled up, and it probably doesn't help that like we look at mental health as like a spectrum and that everybody's on it. Although that's probably realistic, I guess it means like everyone recognizes to some degree the behavior in themselves, innit? I'm OCD because I forgot this today. or I'm depressed because I feel this way today, or I got multiple personalities because this way today. Do you know what I'm saying? It's weird.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't feel like a science. It almost feels a bit subjective, or there's so much room for like interpretation. And that's a bit worrying, I guess.
I guess that's why the experts, they spend years studying so they can deal with those hairline distinctions, and they can ascertain what that person has. You know, whereas a layman or like me who doesn't know, I wouldn't even begin to understand. I'd have to refer them to someone who could actually analyze and help them. It's much more complicated for me to give an answer for that.
I find it fascinating, though.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Anonymous says bipolar and depression are quite often put in the same arena from her eyes. I'm out. Have a great night. Bipolar and depression. Yeah, I can see. I wonder if bipolar means you have to have the lows, though. I guess by duality, to have a high, you're gonna, like, by contrast, there will be a low. But I wonder if you could be like super jolly and then, I don't know, super caring, but just two extremes. Do you know what I mean? Not necessarily a low, but just two extremes.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Yeah, it is possible. Which is scary because if you're being very happy, that could still be diagnosed as being a problem. But of course, the person who's been diagnosed doesn't see that as a problem, especially with like manic depressives or bipolar. Some might, some, not all of them, but some become really high with joy and happy, and that might be ascertained as being a problem, unfortunately for them. Yeah, I've seen that before. Mm.
And then you got Tourette's. I find Tourette's fascinating as well.
Mm. That's deep within the brain. What's making someone react that way? I don't think they have what's the solution for that? There isn't like a straightforward solution.
I think more than anything, it's like therapy, understanding like coping mechanisms, and like maybe understanding their triggers. Because I'd imagine certain environments or certain scenarios might, like stress might be a trigger. Get me? So maybe it's stuff like therapy to make them recognize or arm them with tools to sort of diffuse the situation or remove themselves from. I don't know, but I don't think, because it is neurological, I don't think we know enough about the brain to really go in there poking around. Hence why there's probably not an absolute cure for it at the moment. But yeah, I find it fascinating. And they have tics and twitches and words and But yeah, no, it's really fascinating. But yeah, we'll probably call it a night now. It's been a good show. Blessings to everyone in the chat that passed through. Big up everyone that passed through on the panel as well. Big up Anonymous, Sister Anonymous, Brother Witness, Sister Melanated for doing a thing again. Sister Nines. Big up Ease in the chat. Mills Turk passed through. Man like Raz passed through. Big up Raz. Protect ourselves like AJ should have protected the back of your head. Right, okay. Raz was handling some stuff. Go through Raz. You know, please see fit, my brother. Big up Scattered past you as well. Big up Kushti Cosmetics, providing cosmetics for our community for a darker skin tones. Check her out at kushticosmetics.com. Annabelle Ras Trill passed through. Big up, big up. Yeah, man. So big up everyone that passed through, man. Got this, everyone. And we'll be back on next Monday at the same time to bring you another Constructive Convos. Until then, family, big up and peace out. Bless.